So we talked about a lot of vengeance this November, from a super grim movie, to a super grim show, to a grim anime. Yeah, it's been a pretty miserable experience so far. So if we're gonna say goodbye to November, my birthday was on the 27th by the way, please give me attention and praise me. Let's go ahead and have some fun. Yeah, sometimes vengeance can be fun, so let's rock out with our cocks out. Yep. Reacher. Now, Reacher is the 2022 adaptation to the Jack Reacher novel series by Lee Child, in specific the first book, Killing Floor. The story follows a mysterious stranger, only known as Jack Reacher, appearing in small-town Georgia amidst a series of brutal murders. At first, he's suspected of being the killer himself, but he manages to forge a very uneasy alliance with the local police to find the real killers, slowly uncovering a conspiracy that goes way beyond Margrave, Georgia, and points to international involvement, one that targets Reacher's loved ones and puts him on a path of vengeance. Now, some of you guys might already be getting flashbacks to Terminal List, since that's another Amazon series about a badass protagonist uncovering a conspiracy after the death of his family, and is also an adaptation of a novel series, but Reacher is sort of the yin to Terminal List's yang. Terminal List is a dark story exploring human experimentation and the loss of the protagonist's humanity. Reacher is way more lighthearted and meant to be fun. This is basically an action comedy. But before we actually delve into the story, let's give some context here. Lee Child is the author of the Reacher series, of which there are currently 27 books, with a 28th coming out next year, and this isn't talking about the short stories that are also canon and give more depth to the character backgrounds. Yeah, it's a lot. To describe Reacher as a series, essentially think Sherlock Holmes if he was in the body of Brock Lesnar. You have this absolute huge fucking brute that you assume is just a dumb thug, but he's actually the smartest guy in the room by far. He's a former military police investigator, long retired and now enjoying life as a drifter, though he's constantly pulled into various shenanigans and misadventures that usually require grisly violence. The novel series is very similar to a collection of serials, standalone adventures that slowly build up a larger history for the characters, but focus on being able to tell a complete story for each book, and this has been going on for around 25 years, with Killing Floor being published in 1997. Now, the Amazon series is actually not the first time the Reacher series has been adapted. Tom Cruise actually portrayed the character in 2 movies. The first one, Jack Reacher, which adapted the story One Shot, and the sequel, Jack Reacher Never Go Back, which adapted Never Go Back. The movies themselves are fun action flicks, but if you're a fan of the series, you might have noticed a, problem with the Tom Cruise versions. There's a reason I brought up the Sherlock Holmes in the body of Brock Lesnar description for Reacher. The dude is 6'5" and covered in muscle. He's huge, and it winds up being a very important detail for the character, since his physique gives him combat advantages, making him more intimidating, and allows him to outsmart the opponents that think he's just a dumb gorilla. Tom Cruise nailed the personality of Reacher, at least what I thought, being a very chill and playful dude that is capable of just flipping a switch and becoming a fucking beast in a fight.
Once I take out the leader, which is you, I'll have to contend with 1 or 2 enthusiastic wingmen. The last 2 guys, I always run.
But the physical aspect ended up pissing off a lot of fans, and the author himself agreed that they needed to find an actor that better fit the character. By the way, the 2 Jack Reacher movies aren't bad. I mean, they're fun action movies, but you go in thinking it's a Tom Cruise vehicle and not an adaptation of Jack Reacher. The Amazon adaptation instead cast Alan Ritchson as the titular character, who instead of Tom Cruise, who is 5'7", stands at 6'2". He is also far more muscular, meaning he's a lot closer to what Lee Child had in mind when he was developing Reacher. Now, some of you might be feeling a bit of deja vu with Alan Ritchson, and that's because he's been in a number of things throughout the years, from Smallville as Aquaman to Thad from Blue Mountain State, which if you saw that last one, the idea that this guy could be a genius detective might sound a bit far-fetched.
We just wish you would get the hell out of my face! Get out of my face! Get out!
Still, he's really good as Reacher, but I'll talk about that in a bit. The actual series of Reacher is 8 episodes, each about an hour long or so, and it's one of those where each episode builds up the story, so spoilers are a factor here. especially since this is a murder mystery show as well. But instead of it being a whodunit, something like a True Detective for instance, it's more about figuring out what exactly is going on. There's a clear conspiracy and multiple perpetrators involved, including corrupt cops and criminals capable of assassinating federal employees. But it's not really a work your way up the hit list style either. This is treated as an actual investigation, trying to find evidence, suss out who is corrupt and who's just a victim of circumstance, and beating the ever-loving shit out of suspects who just won't stop resisting arrest. So while this is a story of revenge, with Reacher trying to find out who killed his family, the character himself is able to remain level-headed and acts more like a cop. Just a cop that, you know, forgets procedure a few times, but don't worry about that. This is a very fun show. While it has some pretty grotesque violence, the tone itself never tries to go beyond fun action show. It's well aware that audiences are there for a good time, so it's focused on keeping things in that field. It does have dramatic moments, such as characters that die or moments when things hit a lowest point, but they never indulge or try to make it miserable. In fact, if there was a vibe to describe it, the best words would probably be a good Shane Black movie. There's a good sense of humor that helps you latch onto the characters, along with a genuinely compelling mystery that's fun to try and figure out. Really, the whole thing just kept reminding me of an 80s action movie. A badass protagonist that steals the show, banter with a much more down-to-earth partner who acts like the straight man, the love interest who's a rough-and-tumble country girl who doesn't take shit. It sort of feels like a time capsule in a way. The soundtrack is all classic rock too. Finley has some pretty damn good taste in music, along with some good old southern blues to add variety. The cinematography is also very bright, and even the nighttime scenes have a lot of slick lighting. This isn't trying to be menacing or uncomfortable by any means, and it would be a stretch to call it a noir style. It's an action series with comedy mixed into it, so the visuals are very easy to look at, though the gore is gnarly. They're unafraid of showing the Live Leaks level consequences of messing with the bad guys, though Reacher is more than capable of retaliating in full. This man is gonna need an eye patch. Even the bad guys gave off the feel of like the dudes from Lethal Weapon, just complete douchebags that are in it for the money and won't hesitate killing innocent people simply for suspecting they might be a problem. You have zero sympathy for these guys, and the best scenes are watching Reacher go fucking berserk on them. Since yeah, pissing off a big dude who's ex-military tends to be a really bad idea. A really bad idea. Now the cast themselves beyond Reacher are also pretty likable. You have the police captain, Oscar Finley, who winds up being the character that is sort of the Danny Glover to Reacher's Mel Gibson. While Reacher is not a cop and doing some pretty shady and fucked up things to uncover the conspiracy, Finley is the traditional by-the-book cop, wanting to investigate things properly and trying to manage Reacher's vigilante tendencies. It follows the traditional buddy cop formula. The two do not like each other and they both believe the other is actually tied to the conspiracy, but they're forced to team up, eventually growing to trust one another after saving each other's asses. You also have Roscoe, who is one of the only other cops not tied to the conspiracy, and she sort of fills out the trio of protagonists. She's the only actual native to Margrave, as Finley's from New England, so she sorta has a loyalty to the town that makes her far more protective and emotionally involved than the other two. It also gives her better insight that lets her help out with uncovering details that the other two simply didn't think about, such as being closer to the townfolk and able to actually talk them into giving up details that they kept hidden from Finley and Reacher. While she is a full-blown cop, like Finley, she's more accepting of Reacher's methods if she feels the situation calls for it. So you have a sorta trifecta of conflicting views, all coming together to figure out who's killing people in Margrave. Now, this is an action show, so how is the action? Personally, I thought the fights in Reacher were all great. I mentioned before that Reacher's size is a major aspect to who he is as a character, and you really see what that means in the show. He's a big guy, so the fight scenes all have to account for this. Everything from just smacking weapons out of people's hands to breaking limbs barehanded. It really embodies the pissed off gorilla vibe. Even the gun he gets is a huge ass Desert Eagle, chambered in 50 cal Action Express. So yeah, those are some big ass exit wounds. Another aspect to Reacher as a character is that while he technically was a cop, being military police, he's far more of an ends justify the means kind of guy. That's not to say he's an anti-hero, at least not in the way you might be thinking. He's simply one of those dudes who's willing to do violent shit to somebody he views as a scumbag, and is willing to put efficiency over having a fair fight whenever possible. If he has a chance to shoot somebody in the back, he's gonna take it. Hell, there's one episode where he baits a bunch of bad guys into trying to kill him at a house, and the situation turns into fucking Halloween, with Reacher stalking and executing the criminals one by one. The guy can be scary, and that's part of the fun of the show. There are multiple scenes where Reacher is just staring a bad guy down, not even saying a word, and the dude he's talking to just shrivels up. Cause yeah, homie, you're not gonna win that fight.
And you knew I'd come in here and cause a problem that would most likely get me in trouble.
To know what you don't know?
What's that?
What it feels like when I hit you.
Now, the show changes some details from the first book, mainly small stuff such as how in the novel, the corrupt sheriff directly accuses Reacher of being at the scene of the murder, while in the show, they never actually accuse him, and mainly hold him in custody on suspicion of being involved. They also subvert one of the character deaths, but that would require spoilers and fully explaining the mystery. I will throw up a spoiler warning here, so if you haven't seen Reacher yet, I'll highly recommend you guys sit down and give it a watch. It's a really fun show, and I don't want to ruin half the fun of a mystery if you guys haven't watched through it yet. So the actual conspiracy of Reacher is this. The KLINER family, which are billionaires that set up shop in Margrave some years ago and revitalized the town, are in bed with a Venezuelan cartel, working on a counterfeiting operation that's been going on for at least 10 years. There was a risk of being found some years before due to the chemical pollution ruining the river of a separate town that caused the EPA to investigate, but they managed to murder the agent investigating the pollution with the help of a corrupt FBI agent who worked as a hitman, only known as the Viking. After this incident, they moved the operation to Margrave, and were able to cover up the chemical pollution using animal feed, using local farmland they bought as a cover for the counterfeiting. The inciting incident behind everything is that the accountant for the cartel, a man named Paul HUBBLE, gets cold feet and wants to find a way out, tricked by his boss KLINER into joining the operation in the first place, and then being blackmailed with his involvement. The cartel even goes so far as threatening to kill his entire family if he tries to get out. HUBBLE managed to convince one of the truckers for the cartel, Pete Jobling, into helping him get in contact with federal agents, since Pete himself was stealing money from the bosses and was growing afraid he'd be caught. The agent they contact is actually Reacher's older brother, Joe, who is murdered when he tries to investigate what's going on. But he managed to give his brother a cryptic message about Margrave before his death, knowing he would want to look into his death and avenge him if anything went wrong. The counterfeiting operation bleaches $1 bills and leaves blank paper that can then be reprinted as $100 bills, since the paper itself is the same across every dollar, and that can be shipped off across the world to whatever criminal organization you have as a client. Pretty much every cop in the police department was in bed with the cartel, with only a few exceptions that were either kept in the dark or killed if need be. This includes a man by the name of Gray, who we never actually see since he dies before the events of the show, seemingly of a suicide, but he was basically the father figure and role model for Roscoe. He was killed by the actual mayor of the town, who is one of the major players for the cartel. Reacher and his friends managed to kill the heads of the organization along with their goons, even burning down the entire counterfeiting operation. Literally, they managed to kill the KLINERs, the mayor, and the corrupt FBI agent that replaced the Viking after he died of cancer, who was actually Finley's friend, and he betrays him once they get too close to the truth. You fucking dick. Still, the characters then go their separate ways, and Reacher returns to a life as a drifter, content that he brought the criminals to justice and avenged his brother. Now, I mentioned that the show changes one of the deaths from the book, and this is what I mean. In the book, Reacher kills KLINER's son during the ambush at the house, since he was the main enforcer who led a hit squad killing anyone making problems for the gang. In the show, they change it to be KLINER's nephew, and his son actually kills KLINER, taking control of the operation and becoming the main bad guy. Dude's also a complete psycho, to the point it actually sort of freaks out Reacher. It's pretty funny.
I killed my father. And I cut his throat, just like I saw the Venezuelans do.
The actual mystery itself isn't really groundbreaking or changes the world. It's a bunch of greedy shitbags killing people, but it's still fun putting the pieces together and thinking back on elements they brought up early. One of the most significant plot points in the show is that HUBBLE, a white-collar accountant who works in a bank, is covered in hitchhiker pollen, which only shows up in rural areas around farms. At first, it's treated as an ancillary detail, with Roscoe directly making fun of Reacher for focusing so hard on it. But by the end, it makes complete sense when you have the full context. It's not the most engaging, brain-busting mystery. If you're well acquainted to the genre, you'll probably guess who's good and who's evil really fast. That mayor was not subtle, but it's enjoyable, and that's all it really needs to be. Now, some people really don't like the Reacher novels, viewing the character as a bland piece of cardboard who's, to be honest, only really there to be cool guy McBigDick, and I don't really see it that way. The books are fun, and Reacher himself is an interesting character, at least how I view it. But if you had trouble connecting to the novels, then I would actually suggest checking out the show before writing the whole thing off. Alan Ritchson is able to give the character personality, going from a cocky little shit who knows he's the smartest guy in the room to a stoic brute ready to fuck somebody up, and he's able to flow between the extremes while never feeling like a sudden snap, though when he's pissed off, you really see how much he's pissed. There's also moments where you see his actual humanity, when he's reflecting on childhood memories with his parents and his brother, and you see how much he revered Joe and saw him as a pillar of strength in his life. Family is really important to the guy, and it's a vulnerability that comes up more than once, for better or for worse. It's sort of a running theme. All in all, Reacher is a great show. The first season works as a great introduction into what exactly the series wants to be, and it's a good standalone adventure that can end right then and there if you want it to. Now, there will be multiple seasons. As stated, there's over 27 books to get through, with even more on the way. The second season is going to adapt the 11th book, Bad Luck and Trouble, and that's supposed to come out pretty soon. If you're a fan of the series, you might outright love this show. Lee Child himself is intimately involved as an executive producer, and seems to be dead set on making it for the fans. Now, it's unsure if this is basically going to work like a soft anthology, where the only recurring element is going to be Reacher himself, sort of like Columbo, but the mystery takes entire seasons instead of episodes, or if they're going to let previous actors come back and try to connect it all into one larger plot. But either way, it'll be interesting to see. If you want a fun action show, this is definitely something to check out. It is 8 episodes, so it's a bit of a commitment to sit down and watch, and that's only going to get worse as the seasons go on, but either way, it's something I definitely recommend. It's a great ride you won't regret giving a shot, especially if you miss the age of 80s action schlock, since it feels almost nostalgic for that style of action story. And it's a better way of trying to get into the series than the Tom Cruise movies. You can find the series on Amazon Prime or Pirate Bay, and you should definitely give it a watch. Catch up now before season 2 comes out, so you can be hyped if it's good or pissed off if it's shit, but we shall see when it comes out. Until next time, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys. You wanna know something funny? The guy who wrote the books isn't even American. He's fucking British. Lee Child is a fake name. He's Jim Grant. The Brit Bong is trying to steal our southern culture. Get away from our sweet tea, you fucking limey bastard.
That little cock tease.
Hey, loser. Do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're gonna be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's gonna look at you funny. There's gonna be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I'm now making express threats of violence against you if you do not buy my t-shirt. I will call the police, tell them how they're not, you're not buying my shirt. They're gonna plant crack in your house, and they're gonna arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.
While I put you in a trance, let's party. Boogie in your body. Want that body. Make sure you don't hurt nobody. I say, hey, feeling the fire with a burning desire. Yeah, get up off of that thing. Dance and shake and let's swing. Come on, girl, let me rock the world. While I put you in a